Good evening and welcome to MetroFocus. I'm Rafael P. Roman. Last month, we presented Justice Week, an initiative focused on the de Blasio administration's efforts to close Rikers Island and replace it with 4 community-based jails. That plan is facing fierce opposition in the neighborhoods where the potential jails would be located. In fact, community boards in Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, and the Bronx have all recently voted down the mayor's proposed sites. Those votes are not the final word on the fate of these jails, however. The City Council is expected to make the final decision later this year. And joining us now to talk about the concerns of the communities that are being directly impacted by the mayor's plan are Ida Vernon, co-founder of Queens Residents United, a group that's educating the community about the Queens jail and organizing opposition to it, and Michael Johnson, co-founder of South Bronx Unite, a coalition focused on improving the Mott Haven-Port Morris section of the borough. Welcome to the program, both of you.
Thank you, Rafael.
So I'd like to get the answers to my first question from both of you, but let me start with you. As I said, and as we know, the mayor is in the process of trying to close down the Rikers complex of jails and transition into the 4 community jails that are one in each of the boroughs except Staten Island. What's your principal objection to that process as it's being played out?
I have 2. The first is that I think the notion of spending billions of dollars to build high-rise jails and residential communities to continue to jail people is a way to accomplish criminal justice reform. So I totally reject that out of hand, as do my neighbors in my neighborhood of Briarwood and surrounding neighborhoods. Those of us in the communities who oppose the plan as it's currently conceived have been labeled or are concerned about being labeled as against criminal justice reform. We are not. We are against the scandalous waste of money that this represents, instead of using it to improve our schools and treat the mentally ill, those with substance abuse, and to offer affordable housing to the communities most at risk of encounters with the criminal justice system. And I also object to the process, which Michael, I think, will probably agree with me, basically has cut out meaningful input from the people who will have to live with these jails once they are built.
I do want to add that, what does criminal justice reform look like? And does it mean we close Rikers, which we're not against, but does it mean building more facilities like it that are brand new, but you're creating the same system within those new facilities? It's not changing the problem that exists at Rikers. We need to reduce the people who are incarcerated that are there for nonviolent offenses. We need to do all types of alternatives to incarceration programs, which already are working. We need to make sure that the parole system is working appropriately, and also folks who are sitting in Rikers, most of all, are looking for their day in court. Mm-hmm. We've had terrible situations where people have stayed there for years waiting for their day in court if they did not cop out to a crime that they're alleged to have committed. So we have to do differently. We can't create the same situation expecting different results.
But I know how the administration would respond. They're saying that they can chew and walk and chew gum at the same time. That all these things that both of you are saying, they're trying to do. And at the same time, they are reducing the population of detainees.
But let me get into that. Let me say that and respond to that. Chew gum and walk at the same time. My community of Mott Haven in South Bronx has been for decades subjected to top-down decision-making that has caused the highest rates of unemployment, the most unhealthy county in all of New York State, the poorest performing school districts, the poorest train system in the entire New York City. You go to our train stations, see the dilapidated situation they're in. So why is it that we think now that top-down decision-making create a different opportunity for us, and it has not for decades. So we all know.
When you say top-down, you're making the argument that I was making earlier, that there hasn't been transparency, that there hasn't been community engagement. But listen,
proper planning doesn't come from just our elected officials. It has to come from communities.
Right. And you're saying, to be clear, that you were not given the opportunity to engage. But before you do, because I have a clip from a conversation that I had with Dana Kaplan, who's kind of taken he's one of the people responsible for the transition from Rikers. And we did. I spoke to her specifically about transparency and community engagement. And this is what she had to say. Let's take a look.
We also have set up neighborhood advisory councils to understand what the neighborhood concerns are, and have had dozens of meetings, met with hundreds of individuals to make sure that we can have, at the end of the day, a plan that achieves our means, is an end to transform the city's justice system, but also acknowledges and recognizes what neighborhood concerns are.
Okay. So dozens of meetings, hundreds of people.
Okay, so Ms. Kaplan's presentation about what has been done with communities is very misleading. First of all, the whole idea to close Rikers and build borough-based jails was basically conceived of, I don't want to say in secret, but first by the Lippman Commission that was set up by the former chief judge of New York State. It had a number of well-connected, politically well-connected, well-funded advocacy organizations, lawyers, a number of very well-meaning people who maybe are experts in different areas but are not experts in our neighborhoods in Queens and the Bronx. There was no, that I know of, and I'm reasonably active in my community and well-informed, no outreach to people in Queens while this was being conceived to get our input and our concerns and make us true partners. And maybe you wouldn't have so much resistance. After the fact, starting after the mayor formally announced it last August, in November of 2018, in Queens, they formed what was ultimately called the Queens Advisory Committee. I was a member of that. There were 5 meetings over 4 months through March. I felt that it was basically done as a checklist. Okay, we have to go through the motions of hearing people, but, well, of pretending to hear people, but not really paying attention. So my view of this is you already have this on the drawing board. It was already headed to being certified by the City Planning Council, which started the formal land use process known as ULUP. And you're basically saying, we're going to build it. We don't really care about your concerns. Just tell us what color paint or curtains you want.
You agree with that, Michael?
I do. And I also want to just note that the results of this Neighborhood Advisory Council, which were not respectively representative of the community itself. It was people who were chosen to be on it. It was people who knew about it was happening, but it wasn't open to the public. And some of the things they came out with for the Mott Haven, Portmore, South Bronx neighborhood as the things that the jail could provide to our community if we accepted it, were things that we should have already. Yes. Better schools, community centers, better transit systems. Yeah. All these things they listed in a report were things we should have without having to accept a 21-story brand new prison facility or jail facility in our neighborhood where our children go to school, right across the street.
Yes.
All 4 relevant community boards in the sites in the neighborhoods where these jails would be built, all of them voted against the proposal. Right. And in the Bronx and in Queens, it was unanimous.
Yes.
How come? What effect does that have?
Okay, so I attended, we actually had 2 community boards 8 and 9, because they're 2 neighborhoods that are really directly affected. I attended those meetings. I spoke at meetings, as did many of my neighbors and neighbors in other neighborhoods. It was very clear that the mayor's representatives who presented the proposal, first of all, it's not even, this is such a serious, important subject. I don't feel the planning was serious. The presentations were, the renderings are, they make it look like, first of all, that the jails are not going to be that tall. They're these gauzy kind of marketing pieces that make it look like the lobby of a hotel. Right, they talk about the moral imperative of closing Rikers. I say the moral imperative is to make the criminal justice system more fair and humane and remedy past injustice. That doesn't necessarily mean building high-rise jails.
But it does mean closing Rikers. No?
I think I lean that way. I know people who think that Rikers. What I would say is that thought has not been given maybe to even how you might repair Rikers. The problem is not the building so much; it's the culture. The culture.
Yeah, but the buildings are a problem too, and the fact that it's so distant and so cut off, right? Yes.
It is somewhat distant. It is inconvenient, and I lean towards closing it. I will say I don't feel there's been adequate discussion of alternatives, and policy making at this level should be done by informed, reasonable analysis based on facts. People feel passionate. People are emotional. You know, Rikers is a terrible place. I want to say that I do know people, corrections officers, you know, retired and current, who, they're being tarred with, the evils of Rikers. There are people there who are trying to make it a better place. And guards as well as detainees are victims of violence. And this has been because different administrations, not just this administration, de Blasio's, but have neglected it and out of sight, out of mind. Back in March, in a meeting with the mayor, he came to Queens and met with a number of advocates that oppose this plan and tried to talk to him in a very reasonable, civil, but passionate manner about why we oppose it. And the mayor's response, which I found astounding from a so-called progressive mayor who's now running as a progressive candidate for president, is that he said, I run a city of 8 million people. I can't talk to all of you. I got elected, and this is what, I have the right to do. To which I would say, Mr. Mayor, and to our elected officials, you were initially against the closing of Rikers. You have the right to change your mind. You should have heard from both sides first, or from all sides.
We have about 30.
And you did not. And this is a big flaw in representative democracy.
Last word, Michael.
I think we still are calling out to our elected officials and to our mayor to hear the voices of the people, right? There's something wrong with this plan. People are saying and screaming from the rooftops, there's something wrong with this plan. You cannot just wipe that away as not being legitimate. We need the mayor, our city council people, the city council to listen to the will of the people that something needs to be different.
But right now, it looks like the city council, if they were to vote today, would vote for the mayor's plan.
I don't know about that, but we have faith that they will listen. We have, we're still working on the ground. We're trying to make sure that our people have voices and their voices are heard.
Okay, well, we'll have to end it there. Thank you so much for joining us today. This won't be the last time we speak about this issue.
Thanks. You, Raphael.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate the opportunity.